Hey friends,
Hello.
we are back with a review slash reaction to
Yeah.
season one, episode 3 of the Acolyte.
Acolyte. We're talking Star
Yeah, we're talking
Wars.
more Star Wars. We wanted to start with a little bit of a note just about our personalities.
A bit of a disclaimer.
We are positive people.
Yeah.
We tend to like things that we watch.
Yeah.
We try to see the good in them if we're going to invest our time in watching them.
Yeah.
And we understand that may not be for everybody. You may disagree with us. That's fine. If you don't like it, you can feel free to drop a comment and let us know, or just move on. Probably better to move on with your life.
Less stressful that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we generally like most things. We have a recent video actually up on our channel now where I talk about a show that I didn't like. But that being said, it's very rare that we don't like a show. So we're going to be talking about that. So spoiler alert.
Yeah.
We liked it.
Yeah.
That's going to be
we liked it.
We liked it.
And
so
I mean, when we don't like things, we just turn it off and move on.
Yeah, pretty much. So what we talk about on the show is basically what we liked, what we maybe parts of it weren't our favorites, and what we wish had happened instead. Usually the turn we're usually like, oh, well that could have been better, or things like that. So there's like sometimes there's things we wish had gone differently or better, or wish were tweaked or whatever, but it doesn't ruin it for us, like ever. So if that's your perspective, if you're nerdy and you like stuff, this is a place for you, and we're glad you're here. So with all that said, let's talk Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I keep saying season. Episode 3 of the Acolyte. We don't know if there's going to be multiple seasons, so let's just say episode.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot to explore.
Yeah, there certainly is. Episode 3 of the Acolyte was last night, and we start this episode, and really the entire episode consists of a flashback to kind of like the pivotal moment of the childhood for Osha and May. And we see kind of a little bit of context of their upbringing. We see their encounter with the Jedi and how that led to things going very wrong.
Well, kind of.
Well,
we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So this was the story, the what happened. What happened on Brendok, which I asked at the end of our last review. What happened on Brendok? This gave an answer to what happened on Brendok, but we still have a lot of things that are not explained.
Yeah, and we're left with a lot of questions.
A lot.
One of the themes that we talked about earlier today that we think they're touching on is the idea of an unreliable narrator. Yeah. And I think this episode kind of shows that, like, yeah, some of the stuff doesn't quite make sense, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that I think that's intentional, because we're seeing this through the eyes of a character who didn't really understand everything that was going on. Yeah. And didn't have the full picture of everything that was happening.
And so I think a big thing with this episode is to understand that this episode is not an explanation. This episode is a perspective, because the person who is seeing everything happen is Osha. This entire episode, nothing happens without her being there. There are several moments where May goes somewhere or leaves or isn't there yet and then arrives, and Osha is there. So this whole episode was from Osha's perspective. So it's one character's perspective, and this character is a child. So this is all from a child's perspective. So the big thing for me that we left the episode with, like, not explained, is we don't know how we still don't know how this event resulted in the Wookiee Jedi leaving and going into exile, and our Padawan shutting down and eventually committing suicide.
Yeah.
Like, what we saw happen in episode 3 doesn't explain their reactions to it.
Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of an inconsistency potentially. With some of that stuff that, again, I think might be intentional. I think we should
keep an open mind.
We should give them the benefit of the doubt.
We don't really have all the answers. We haven't
seen the whole series yet. We don't know exactly where they're going. But one thing that I was thinking about is we have Torben, who is a Padawan 16 years before the events of the show.
Yep.
When the events are taking place,
He's a master.
he's a master, but he's been in meditation for 10 years.
Yeah.
So in 6 years, he went from being a Padawan to a master. That seems really fast, and it makes me think like, okay, there's got to be something more to the story.
There's
got to be
more.
something else going on.
We didn't see how he got his scar and is blind in
Mhm.
one eye, which would be significant for anybody, particularly this character, apparently. We don't see the explanations. There aren't clear explanations of my sister killed my family and ruined my life. Like, that was stated by Osha.
Mhm.
And in this flashback, we are seeing her perspective and kind of her version of events. And that's not really clear. It's clear that the sisters have strife, they have disagreements, they are not seeing eye to eye. May is aggressive when Osha doesn't agree with her. Apparently, although we did only see that one time, where May reacted a little bit violently to Osha.
Yeah.
Usually Osha's the instigator, I've noticed. Like when they're in the background and the mothers are talking, and the girls are poking each other, Osha usually instigates it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I think it kind of makes sense in context, right? Because May is more willing to buy into like
she's more compliant
into what's going on with their
yeah
family, I guess, with their upbringing.
I mean, if you have kids, generally speaking, you have a child who's a little bit more compliant and a little bit more like, okay, sounds good, mom, I'll do that. Not always. And then and usually that's your firstborn. And then you have your second child. And they don't agree with you ever. Like so that's kind of the vibe that the sisters were giving me. And it's interesting. Like there's just inconsistency with Osha's character. She's pushing boundaries and she's not wanting to conform. So she leaves and goes to the Jedi.
Yeah,
and says, and then she leaves the Jedi. Like eventually we know she does leave the so there's something
I do think there's an interesting twist going on here because normally, or maybe not normally, but often you have like a character who's brought up in a setting where like everyone around them is good and they kind of want to rebel against that. They want to push back against that. And we see like the opposite happening here, right? She's brought up among a bunch of force sensitive people who are in tune with the dark side of the force.
A little bit, yeah.
And she's like, I don't know if I want this. I think I want to go join the Jedi because they're the good guys. Although,
which is really interesting that she
maybe seeing a little bit of a different side of the Jedi in this too.
Even has that perspective. Yeah. So it's just interesting, and it's not unbelievable to me. Like it's just not, because even in being raised in this dark side, not 100% light side, we'll call it that, because it did have good things, but it also had bad things. They were using both sides, if you want to call it that. But even being raised in a more dark side leaning way of life or a way of thinking, she was genuinely loved, and she felt genuinely loved by her sister and by the mothers in the, like, she felt very cared for. Mother Anasea was very loving and listened to her, and she felt understood and heard by her. She experienced good things, and I think they did that. I think they really did that to kind of contrast this group of witches to like the witches of Dathomir that we're familiar with, the other group of female dark side cultists that we know in Star Wars, because they are aggressively dark side and they have a loving nature about them, but in a way that's manipulative, and they are very much like pushing for power and pushing for precedence and so there is definitely a darker leaning to them. Like they're not even pretending to not be dark, whereas this group is kind of in between. They're not quite there yet. They're not quite there, but they're not quite like Qui-Gon, who is like listening to the will of the Force. So they're somewhere in the gray area, if there is one.
The argument that they were making was
Yeah.
You know, it's not about good versus evil. It's about power and who's allowed to use it.
Which is
And
an
so
interesting.
their objection is more that
Yeah.
like the Jedi have a monopoly on the Force, which is way too powerful for one group to be allowed to have a monopoly
Yeah,
on.
which in this era is not incorrect, but also in this era in the Legends continuity, there are other Force sensitive groups. I think the issue that the Jedi have with this group is that they have children.
Yeah.
And that is an issue that the Republic has more than the Jedi have, based on what we understand, which I could see that. And then this whole episode was just like pushing everything into a gray area of the Jedi are enforcing, Republic law. Brendok isn't part of the Republic, but apparently they have just moved there from somewhere in the Republic, so they're in a gray area. So the Jedi
Yeah.
are in a gray area,
Yeah.
even doing this. And so so that was really interesting, and just perspectives. And then this is, I think, my biggest problem in just this is a Star Wars in general problem, is that kids are not allowed to be kids, which I have a problem with. I mean, I understand it from like a world building and lore perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just not true or reality. That it's just not. This is not what breeds functioning adults. Healthy
Yeah.
functioning adults is to take away their childhood, because that's what happens in both of these situations, in this witches coven, but also in the Jedi Temple. These children are not allowed to be children.
Yeah.
um,
I
Mother
mean,
Anastasia was pushing for that a little bit, but
I do think
yeah,
like there's a lot of kids who grow up in situations around the world where they're not allowed to be kids. Like they have to grow up faster than they
I
should
agree,
have to.
absolutely.
And I
That
think
doesn't make it a
one of
good
the
thing.
no, but I think if you're going to have a universe that feels real to people, that has to
Mm-hmm.
be a part of it, at least somewhere. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the things about Star Wars is like this seems to be the case everywhere. Like this is just not
Yeah,
a happy place to be.
no. And I've
So
heard someone describe the Star Wars universe as a post-apocalyptic universe, and I'm like, yeah, that checks out.
yeah,
No one's having fun.
yeah. There's a lot of similarities there.
It's a lot of. So that's just like the kids. The kids are not all right
Yeah,
in Star Wars.
yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe we should talk about things that we liked from the episode.
yeah. We'll talk about things that we like highlights.
Yeah,
So highlights for me was the witches. Like I I love my favorite part of Clone Wars are the witches of Dathomir. I love that the witches came back in Ahsoka. And I love it. I cannot get enough of these dark side ladies. Like they are so fun. It is so fun. And it's so different. And I love it. And I love the lore. I love that they're different. I love that they're their own brand of this is a personal thing. I love a good bad female character. Like I understand strong villains, strong, male villains, but a strong female villain is so good. It's so good. I mean, there's so many examples like Dolores Umbridge, the White Witch in Narnia. Just you name it. There's the female when there is a good female villain. It is the best. And so I love the Witches of Dathomir because they are female villains who are also just being characters. It's wonderful. And Asajj Ventress is the best. I love her so much. I just do, as a character. So I was super excited that there were going to be witches. And so, I was sold already on this episode. And then they were different. They
they were
were
very different.
different, and they didn't have the green magic. So it makes me curious if this, because they're not all, we only had one example of them. One of them is of the same race as the Dathomir witches, and then everybody else was different. There was like a Twi'lek in there, and there was very obviously several humans. There were different races, which wasn't really apparent in the Dathomiri witches. So that was really interesting. That was fun. That was different. So they were kind of like Mandalorians in that way, that they just accept anybody who's force sensitive, which is really interesting. And so I just love that about them. I really liked the chanting.
I have to say I hated that part. I
I thought
thought
it
it
was so
was
fun.
I thought it was so cringe.
I loved it. I was like, oh, this is great. They're even getting in tune and having a little choir moment. I thought it was great.
I thought like that whole scene I thought was just incredibly awkward.
Oh, I
The
loved it.
random witch just cackling in the part
Oh,
leading
it
up
was
to that
wonderful.
just broke it for me.
Oh, I loved it.
And like I could barely keep a straight face. And then when they started like chanting into like almost singing and then back into chanting, like
It was great.
I couldn't do
I
it.
loved it. It gave like big, like to me, it felt like a revivalist, like
It
Pentecostal church feel.
yeah.
You know,
It was,
I loved. I thought it was so fun. It was so different. It was just they were. I gotta say,
I
all
got big
those.
Mystery Science Theater vibes from that scene. Like I'm sorry.
I
We're generally positive, but like
originally
not
positive,
everything is
not
positive.
everything, and that's okay. That's we're allowed, but we can't rag on it.
But I will
So
say, like that didn't ruin the whole show for me. It didn't ruin the whole series, and
no, and it
like
wasn't that long. Like it,
let's not overreact, people.
it was not that big a deal. Like it was just one scene. I really enjoyed. So me watching that, when I'm watching a scene like that, I'm not really into the story in that moment. I'm watching everyone act. And I loved watching all of those ladies in that group like, oh, they have committed to the bit. All those, part-time actors, like they don't have a name in the script. They don't have lines necessarily in this, but they're committed and they're full in, and I am loving their energy. Like I was excited for them. Like I was rooting for them. Like, yeah, you go, girl. So that was me. But anyways, I really enjoyed that. The girls acting, the girls playing the twins were superb. Like they had some intense, they were conveying really intense emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and all that was just like, that was really good. And there were times where I was like, oh yeah, they're kids. Like,
Yeah,
oh, like I saw someone be really upset about like the dialogue and everything. And I'm like, first of all, it's Star Wars. When has superb dialogue been a thing? We have really good monologues, but dialogue is not our strong suit. And that's fine. We like them anyways. But
yeah,
they're really good characters. And these girls were embodying these characters. And they were both, I mean, they were playing twins, but they were very different, which I have to say, those girls did a great job at being very different characters and having conflict and but also conveying that they really care about each other and they care about this place and these people. So, I mean, they did fantastic. And the costuming was amazing, and the hair and makeup, just I loved Mother Anastasia's, like, her hair. Oh my gosh, her hair was amazing. It was like Black Rapunzel. I was so happy. Like it was amazing. And then she wore it as a scarf. And I was just like, I felt really hot, and like my head kind of was like giving me headaches thinking about it. But like, maybe, I don't know. But also like it was amazing and gorgeous. And she had like bone ring things on her hands. Like those were cool. So all of that was really good. I really enjoyed that also. I don't know if you noticed this, but Soul, his look and his, like, they made him look very young,
mm-hmm.
but they also made him look almost angelic. Like his makeup was perfect. Like
Yeah.
he looked absolutely, like
I
he
mean,
almost glowed. He was
they did a good
perfect.
amount of CGI de aging for
Well, for
all of the
sure.
Jedi.
Yes. But like, well, not Torben because he's like 20. So
Well, I mean, when they aged him up in the other scenes.
they did in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
Anyways, but like, but that was really good because it was conveying through very, very simple of just like making him a baby face, making him really look the role of savior, which is what he is for Osha.
Yeah.
And but also conveying like he cares about her like instantly. He is seeing her push against and seeing that she is not like her family.
Mm-hmm.
And he identifies with that like really strongly, and
Yeah.
just that he's not wanting to break up this family. He is just wanting what he's wanting to help her and to encourage her in the way that he was encouraged. And I liked that he wasn't championing breaking up the family, and leaving the family, but he was championing to her that there are people like her, and if she wants to be with them, they can do that. Like, that's a possibility.
And telling her, like, you have a choice in
And
how
that
your
she
life
has
is
a
going to play out.
choice. Yeah, which
Yeah.
she and I think, he's saying that because he is seeing that she's not given a choice and she doesn't want to do what is happening. She doesn't want to go through with this, and he is seeing that in her.
Yeah. I think,
which again,
that kind of gets into what I really liked about this episode.
Okay.
Which there's two things that I want to really highlight for me. One is just Master Soul. I think he's a great character. Lee Jung Jae. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
He's from Squid Game. I know that.
Yeah,
much.
yeah, and he learned English to do this role,
which is amazing.
and he is absolutely killing it.
He's phenomenal.
He's like the perfect Jedi, I think here.
Like
I do think, going back to like the unreliable narrator aspect of it, there may be some things that he's not really being forthright with. We may find out more about like what really happened, or why May is trying to kill these Jedi, and what are they trying to hide. But for now, at least in the story, I think his acting has been just absolutely brilliant, and he is doing a great job of being like the Jedi that we want to see and that we know.
Yeah.
And then the other theme of just like children should have, like, they should be able to say no to things.
Yeah.
You know, that if a child doesn't want to do something, you should listen to them and you should understand, like, why don't they want to do this. And we did see some of that from Mother Anastasia.
Yeah. That was
when
really
Osha
good.
was like, I don't want to do this, I don't
She's
want
a
to become a
good-
witch, she listened to her
Yeah.
and she talked to her and she treated her like a person.
She's a good parent.
Because so many times kids are just like, not listened to and taken along for the ride and just told, like,
Or the opposite, which is where I think the Jedi are at fault a little bit, is they're treating her too much like an adult.
Yeah.
Like, she still needs structure and boundaries and people helping and guiding her. And the choice to leave and go to another, completely different part of the galaxy to be, that's a grown-up choice. And that's not good
but
either.
I guess the thing that I'm getting at is, like, these kids were kind of being like strong-armed into going into the family business of being witches, which is quite the family business. But he came in and said, like, if you don't want to do this, like, there's another way that you can choose to live your life.
Yeah.
And I would be happy to tell you about that and show you that.
It was also interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
He came in with like fatherly energy that I really appreciated, and like, this is how I would want to talk to my kids when they're struggling with something.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really good.
Very reminiscent of Qui-Gon talking like with Shmi about Anakin. Very of like, no, he is unique. You are unique. You are different, and that's okay. There is a place where we can, foster those gifts and who you are and help you become all that you can be, and that kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be this path.
Yeah.
Anakin doesn't have to be a slave. He doesn't have to do this thing. He can if he wants to. And I think that's the other thing too, is that Soul was conveying like, no, there is this other path, but it is your choice. Like, no one's forcing you. Whereas at home, like, she very much was, I don't know if being forced was the right word, but like saying no to becoming a witch would have bad ramifications on a relational level that was terrifying to her. Like, it was not good.
She felt like she was in a position where she would have become an outcast if that's the choice that she made.
Like, what
and
was
there
she
was
gonna
probably
do?
some reality to that.
Yeah.
But that's a terrible place for a kid to be,
Yeah. And then I think there's like several things that, again, we don't know yet. We don't know how these girls were made, because apparently they were made. They were not conceived in the normal way because there's no men around. So were made, which is kind of a dark side ability, which apparently the Jedi would not be okay with. So my question is, did that come out and that's why, the Jedi attacked? Osha wouldn't know that. Is that, but maybe May does.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information that we still don't have. That doesn't mean that the Jedi taking Osha was wrong, because as far as they knew, everyone was dead. What were they going to do? Leave her there?
Yeah.
Like, that would have been even worse, you know? And then you get to this thing of like, did they know May survived? Because we don't know. The way Soul has spoken about her is he could have known. When did he find out? I don't know. I think they find out later. I don't know. This is my theory at the moment. Is I think the Jedi thought when they left Brendok that everyone except Osha had passed away, had died in the fire of the power station. But I think it's later that they find out that May survived. And I think that is when our Wookiee Jedi goes into exile and Torben goes into his vow of silence. I think it's at that point that they realize we messed up. Like, we thought we were doing the right thing, and then we had hesitation, and now we've looked into it and we made a huge mistake. And now we have all the regrets. We have all the regrets about it. You know, so I think it was a progressive thing of not like, in the moment we knew like we messed up and we ran. Like, that's not the feeling I got.
Yeah.
And I don't think that jives with the actions that they took, because the actions that they took were take Osha to Coruscant.
Yeah.
And Soul is now like raising her. You know, like,
yeah,
that doesn't seem to jive for me. But I don't know. Again, there's a lot of things we don't know, and most of the stuff we don't know are things grown-ups would have known.
Yeah.
And we only know a kid's perspective.
Yeah, and I think it also needs to be mentioned that, like, I understand there's a lot of baggage with the Legends continuity not really being canon, but this is the first canon view we have into this specific era, into this specific century.
Yeah.
And so...
And I know people brought up, like, well, the Jedi were so hesitant to raise Anakin, and we're like, maybe this is why.
Maybe this is why. Maybe they have this story that happened 100 years before of, like, some disaster.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, so I also loved just this episode really tied into, I think this episode is, we're going to be talking about this episode for the rest of the season, because I think a lot of the themes and a lot of the visuals and a lot of things are going to keep tying back to this episode. And I say that mostly because of the moons crossing is in the logo, is in the title and everything. And so that's part of it. We already talked a little bit about how this episode, everyone's in the gray zone. No one is in 100% the light or the dark. We're in a very gray area. And I think this era being when the Jedi believe the Sith are gone, there's a lot of gray. And I think that is what the Jedi are fighting right now. If they're fighting anything, they're fighting their political enemies.
Yeah.
And anyone tending gray because they don't want it to become Sith.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a theme that's going to keep coming back that we're going to see. So I'm excited for next week's episode. Yeah, I'm curious if we're going to see May's perspective. You know, like, this episode was Osha's perspective. Next episode was May's. I don't know if it's going to break down that much.
I don't think they can go to that level, because that would be dedicating 25% of your runtime to two visions of the same backstory. That there's going to be a lot of crossover between.
I think we will get flashbacks, though, of like...
Yeah, but I don't think we're going to get a whole episode flashback from her.
Probably not. I hope next episode...
If we do, it's probably going to be what happened in between for her. Which I would be very interested to see that.
The 20 minutes of when she locks Osha in her room.
No. I mean, what happens post Brendok, pre episode 1?
That for sure.
The series.
Because we still have to have a confrontation with the Wookiee. And we need to know who the supposed Sith is. Who that guy is, which...
He's got a red lightsaber. He has to be Sith, right?
I suppose so.
It would be a letdown if he wasn't.
It would be. I think he is. So we got to find out all the things. And I have a theory about that, but that's for another day. So yeah, we got a lot. I think next episode will probably be back on hunting down Jedi, would be my guess. I would love to see a full episode from May's perspective now.
Yeah.
Like, Like we've seen Osha as a kid, maybe see May and her whole hunting down the Wookiee Jedi and probably failing. Like, let's be real, because it's a Wookiee. But so I'm excited for next week. We will see you then.
Yes.
And in the meantime, stay positive and stay nerdy, yo.
Yeah. If you like the video, give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps us out.
Yeah.
And we hope we see you around.
Bye.
Bye.